I'm Wayne Messam, the proud son of a Jamaican contract sugarcane cutter. My father cut sugarcane in the hot sugarcane fields of the Glades just south of the Lake Okeechobee shorelines, about an hour from here. My father cut sugarcane for 25 cents per row of sugarcane. Now, to put that into perspective, a row of sugarcane is about a quarter-mile long. He did that to support his family, as well to eventually to immigrate to this country for a piece of the American dream. I often wondered if my father ever imagined an America where his son would be the first Black mayor of Miramar, Florida, Florida's 13th largest city, and have the audacity to run for president of these United States back in 2019. Now, back in the early 60s when my father was cutting sugarcane, African Americans couldn't even legally vote in the United States. That took a lot of courage for him to be able to leave Jamaica with my mother and my older siblings, all to chase the American dream. The type of courage that I would soon later need as a college athlete. Now, imagine for a moment a weighted decision. Not just any decision, but one that challenges the very core of your principles, your dreams, and even the expectations placed on you by others. Now, put that same weight on the shoulders of a starting wide receiver on one of America's best football programs in the hunt for another national championship, all while being a business major and student government vice president. Well, in 1995, that was me standing at a crossroads. I was a young football player at the Florida State University Seminoles team, playing for legendary coach Bobby Bowden. Yes, go Noles. And in the 90s, the Florida State dynasty was in full swing. A couple of years prior, my freshman year, we won our first national championship. And in 1995, we were the Associated Press preseason #1 ranked team. So expectations were high. And our team goal was to win another national championship. So all hands needed to be on deck. And then I was presented an opportunity to make a tremendous, albeit controversial decision. I had decided to attend the Million Man March. Now, the Million Man March was a national call for 1 million African American men to meet up in Washington, D.C. at the National Mall for a day of atonement and spiritual renewal. So you may ask, well, what does the Million Man March have to do with football, and why me attending required so much courage in a moment of a big decision? Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, attending the Million Man March in Washington, D.C. would require at least 2 days. That would mean I would miss at least one football practice, which was an obvious violation of team rules, and missing football practice could lead to a suspension, and at worst, a loss of my full scholarship that I needed to pay for my studies. So why risk it? I was an important member of the team. I had my National Football League aspirations ahead of me. I could lose my scholarship. And what would my family think back at home? You see, I just had this conviction burning inside of me that I wanted to be a part of history. There was just something powerful and undeniable about attending the march that would be pivotal, not just for me attending, but for what it meant. But fear gnawed at me. What would coach reactions be? The judgments of my teammates. It was a kind of fear that I come to realize that paralyzes the best of us right at the moment of making a big decision. The kind of fear that nearly 10% of Americans confront daily, swallowed by phobias, dread of failure, the anxiety of the unknown. But in the midst of risking my college football career, I learned an invaluable lesson. I learned that fear, while a formidable adversary, was not insurmountable in the moment of making a big decision. There are 3 things that we all can do to overcome fear at the moment of a big decision. The first step is that we have to acknowledge that we're afraid. And the source of that fear is us. Second, we must take actionable steps that make that big decision a lot easier. And third, we must face fear head on by embracing courage. Now, that first step, when we acknowledge that we are afraid, that self-doubt and negative thoughts, we're the source of that. Yes, you're the source of your own fear. Think about it. How many times you've been confronted with a big decision and all you can think about is the absolute worst outcome that could possibly happen? Those self-doubts and negative thoughts are caused by you. When you feel those thoughts coming into your mind, tune them out. Switch to affirming thoughts. There's just something about positive thinking that gives you the courage to be successful. And when you find that courage, you'll see that you can push your negative self out of the way. It almost reminds me when I had to find a way to tell Coach that I was going to the march. Boy, was I afraid. What if I asked Coach and he said, no, I couldn't go? What about my team's judgment? Would they feel that I was selfish because I wanted to go to this march in D.C. and put it ahead of our national championship goal? Boy, there was so much fear in my mind that I almost didn't want to ask Coach if I could even go. Then I had to quickly realize that I was the source of my own fear. Now, when you stand in the moment of your next big decision, look yourself in the mirror and realize that your self-doubt and those negative thoughts are your biggest hurdle. But the good news is that you have the opportunity to control your mind, and you'll see yourself on that path to making that big decision. Now, the second step we have to take is to make actionable steps to address your fear. Sometimes these big decisions seem so enormous that we feel that we can't make them. Like, for example, firing the CEO of a publicly traded company is hard. Choosing between buying food and your life-saving medicines when you can't afford both is hard. If you're a senior in high school, deciding on which college you're going to attend, that is hard. And ladies, let's be honest, choosing between that Chanel or Gucci purse is very hard. When you feel that the big decision is so enormous that you can't make it, write down little actionable steps that's easy to accomplish. For example, if you're the chair of that board and you need to fire that CEO, convene a meeting of the other board members, followed by a call to your investors. Perhaps that key communication will provide some guidance and some direction on how you can amicably separate from leadership in the least disruptive way. Just like when I had to confront Coach to get that meeting, the toughest thing was that I needed to get that meeting. But guess what my actionable step was? I wrote a letter. I put every fearful thing in that letter. I told Coach that I would miss practice. I told them my reasons and convictions on why I wanted to go to the march. And I even told him that I was willing to accept the consequences going to the march would make. I wrote that letter and gave it to Mrs. Sue, his secretary. And the next day, she called my dorm room, because back then we didn't have cell phones. And she said, Wayne, Coach Bowden says that you need to come to his office immediately to discuss your letter. I was afraid. But guess what? I got my meeting. The third and final step that we can take is to address fear head on. And to do that, sometimes we have to draw on past experiences, positive things that have happened in our lives, to draw on that courage. Now, courage is defined as us being able to do something while we're afraid. Some people may say that having courage means that you're not afraid. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is impossible to be courageous without having fear. You know, fear causes us to avoid making big decisions. Avoidance is the root of procrastination, which is a guarantee that nothing will get done, which means your decision won't be made. So you have to draw on your inner courage to be able to address that big decision with intentionality and firmness. If you approach a big decision in a timid manner, it will cause doubt, and that doubt will beget fear. So oftentimes we have to draw on something that's important to us, as well as maybe even an important person. In my case, I think about my mom and my dad back in those sugarcane fields. And what that does is it gave me the courage to be able to do the things that I did to get that meeting. Now, I know you all want to know what happened in that meeting, right, with Coach, right? Well, I walked into his office, and I'll tell you, it was very intimidating and overwhelming. He said, "Wayne, have a seat." There was a chair across from his desk. I sat down, sweaty palms, feet tapping on the ground, and all of a sudden, a peace and calm came over me. It was like it was the collective spirits of my late mother and father in their journey to this country and the sacrifices they made so that I could have an opportunity to chase the American dream, and combined with the many Black men and women that died and bled for me to even be a student at Florida State University, all gave me the courage to look Coach Bowden in the eye, to tell them that I was missing practice, I was going to the march, and why it was important to me. To my surprise, and maybe even to yours, not only did Coach Bowden understood, but he supported. I got permission to go to the march. He gave the team a day off from practice for a day of atonement, which was in total alignment of our goal of winning another national championship. So I stand before you today, not as a former scholar athlete, but as a testament that when you embrace courage and face your fears head on, that you too can make that big decision. So whether you want to change your career and start a new job, face your fears head on. If you want to start a new business venture, face your fear head on. If you have to have that uncomfortable truth with your spouse or your family member, face your fear head on. Regardless of what your big decision is, face your fear head on. So, as we leave this room this evening, know that you can accomplish anything. You can make that big decision. And just as my father did in those sugarcane fields, and just as I did in Coach Bowden's office, you too can break the shackles of fear and make that big decision. Thank you.